I guess it's time to get started this morning. Is it time? You the timekeeper? Okay. Let's see if we got any prayer requests or anything to be brought up this morning before we get started. Rob, my neighbor, he just can't get around too much, can't do too much, and it's kind of rough on him because he's type that he just likes to be out doing stuff. I mean, they have to kind of keep a rope on him, keep him from getting out and mowing and everything. I mean, he just wants to be out. He just wants to be out working, doing something. So remember them. So. Anybody else this morning?
Praise the Lord. I have my dental work done last week. Everything went real good with it. Thank the Lord for that.
Remember Linda's daughter, she's in the hospital. She had a light stroke. My brother-in-law was had on the prayer list, getting some tough news there. Cancer progressing.
I know we got a lot to pray about. Maybe that's God's way of telling us y'all keep in touch. Every one of you probably, I guess, if you anything like I was, you've heard that I'm fixing to give you something to cry about. When you was a kid, well, the Lord says, well, sometimes He might say, well, let me give you something, give you a reason to call on me. I hadn't heard from you in a while, so we need to keep in touch. Anybody else this morning? We'll get started. Eddie, if you lead us in prayer, we'll get started.
Lord, we thank you for this day, Lord. It's another opportunity to come to your house. Father, thank you for everyone that's here. Ask you to be with Brother Steve and his family, Lord. Lord, we know that he desires to be here, Lord. He can't be here today, but it's ask you to be with Brother Tim as he teaches your word. Lord, with all the sick, dear Heavenly Father, Sister McBurney, Sister Gwen, Kathy, Lord, we just ask you to be with each and every one of them. Just help them to get back with us real soon. Lord, just be with this church and continue to grow. Be with Brother Mayo, Lord, and his wife, to Heavenly Father, just give many souls for your labor, Lord. Thank you once again for everything you do for us. Thank you for letting us live in this country, Lord. Proud to be American, Lord. Thank you so much. All these things we ask in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen. If you're not in my class regular, we're in Matthew in chapter 27. If you're in my class, you know we're there because it seems like we've been there for a year, 26 and 27. Sometimes you can just kind of go through things and hit the high spots and move on and go through. I know when we was in our regular books, going through our little books that we have for our classes and all that, usually they'd put you through a chapter about every week and all this, but some chapters you just there's some things you just can't skip over, and you get hung up on and all, and it's been that way in these two chapters. And we're at a time now when it's speaking about the cross, and more importantly about the one that was on the cross. And we're at the point now where Jesus has been delivered up to be crucified. He, you know, his Jewish people, his own people, carried him before Caiaphas and then the high priest and all, and how they went out and they condemned him. They convicted him and sentenced him before they even had a cause, even before they had an accusation. They didn't have the sentence in to begin with. Well, they didn't really. He was coming to this world for the cross. He was heading for the cross from the very beginning. That's just, there was no stopping that. That had to take place. But this is where we come to. Pilate's had his part in here and all this. He's went through and all. And I want to back up and start reading in verse 35 of this chapter. Now, the important thing to realize about the Jewish people, the priest and the Sanhedrin and all that, the Jewish law was such that it was hard thing for you to be convicted of anything. There was so much written into the law that would prevent you from being wrongly convicted of anything. I mean, it was, if you was a bad dude, the law was kind of in your favor. It was kind of hard it's hard for them to get you on anything. It was, if somebody wanted to get rid of me and wanted me convicted of a crime, you had to have witnesses, 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, to be a witness in that day and time was a pretty big thing, because you was taking on a big responsibility. Because if I was trying to get rid of old Bobby back there, and I said, if I come out and I said, he did such and such, oh, I don't want to bear false witness, because that's a big serious crime. If it turns out that I'm bearing false witness, then I'm subject to the punishment that I was seeking for him. If I said Bobby killed somebody and needed to be put to death, and if I come out there and lied about it, and it was found out, I'm facing the death penalty. So it was hard. It's hard to get people to bear false witness, but you try hard enough, and you can turn people. So the people that tried the hardest that there ever was to make sure that nothing went wrong, here they convicted and sentenced the most innocent one that ever come through this place. That's how far they had come. But they could not carry out well, they didn't crucify anyway. They did stoning, but they could not carry out the death penalty under the Roman rule. So they had to get the Romans involved in all this. So they trumped up stuff and they made stuff. And it went through. It went through all this. And now we're to the point that Pilate, he tried every way in the world to get out of it. And he even had his wife come tell him, hey, listen, don't you have nothing to do with this man? But there was so much pressure about him. It's a political thing. He's there, and he's got his job, and he wants to keep it. So I want to look good to he had bosses too, and he wanted to look good to them. So the thing I got to do is, I'm here in Jerusalem, and I got to keep things quiet here where it's not getting back to my first level that I can't do my job. So he just wants peace. Sometimes, I mean, I know how as parents, a lot of times if there's a bunch of kids around, a lot of times you just really don't care what they do, and sometimes you just want to just peace. I just want it to be quiet for a little bit. I don't care. Then you have cases when it just gets too quiet, and then you really got to go look. But that's what Pilate wanted. But he bowed to what was going on. So he turns him over. Well, starting in verse 35, and we went over this last week. I want to just try to read over this first part and just this kind of tells about some people that was around in vicinity of the cross when it was taking place. And it said, and they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled. Listen, all this stuff is a matter of the prophecies being fulfilled. This was nothing new. This did not come as a great shock to God, to Jesus. It was all prophesied. That it might be spoken of the prophets, they parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. Who parted it? Well, this was a big thing, and we had to, when they crucified Jesus, this had to be, we got to make sure that nothing goes wrong here. And they had the centurion here, and they had the soldiers, and they were there on guard. They were watching this. They were making sure that this goes off smooth. We're going to see it again when you get to the point that he was put in the grave. They said, hey, y'all be out there. And these soldiers here that was there, this wasn't Beetle Bailey and Gomer Pyle. This was the elite. This was people that could do their job really well. They were well trained, and they were diligent about doing their job because they didn't want to face what happened if you didn't. So they were out there, and they split up what clothes he had and his outer garment and all. They no point in just cutting this thing up. So they cast lots to see who was going to get it. And sitting down, they watched him there, and then they just sat down and they were on guard. They were on guard duty. That's what they were doing. So they were there. They were part of the people that was around the cross. This was people that watched the crucifixion. This was the people that were actively involved in it, that spit on him, that hit him, that drove the nails. This is who they were. They were just, as far as they was concerned, they were just out doing their job. These were not Jewish people. It didn't mean nothing to him. This was just another day at work. And they said over his head the accusation, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Well, it was more than just an accusation. It was. They didn't realize it. I mean, they did it mockingly. It was mocking. That's what he was mocking. Jesus, he was mocking the Jews. The Jews they weren't too crazy about some of this. They said, you change this. Pilate says, no, do it just like I said. It said, this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. And there were two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and the other on the left hand. It should have been three. It's supposed to have been three. There was three scheduled for that day. One of them, Barabbas, he was released. And Christ, I'm just trying to get over this quickly. He was released, and Christ was put right in the middle of them. Like, he wasn't over here, right. It's just like he was the ringleader, like he was the head of all of these. That's where he was at. He looked over here and look over here, and that's where they are. So they were there. All these Roman soldiers that it just didn't mean a whole lot to them. Here's these two people that really deserved death. They on either side of it, and they were pretty disparaging about what they said at the beginning. One of them we're going to find later on that he had a change. And they that passed by, there was a passerby, there was people going down the road. This crucifixion, when they did that, when the Romans did this, they didn't take you out behind the barn somewhere. Remember, your daddy, he didn't, mind that. You might get a whooping in the grocery store, but a lot of times they'd take you out to a little secluded place. Yeah, you all heard about the woodshed and all that. Probably, I'm just looking around, probably everybody in here has been there a time or two, or something that resembled it. Well, it wasn't like this. They put this out in public. When I was in school, if they was going to whoop you, they just paddled you right there in front of everybody. They made an example. I've been an example before, and it's things I didn't like being an example of, but this was put out on the side of the road where people passing by. This is people comes by here. I want you to see what happens if you mess with Rome, if you mess with the Romans. You do it our way, or this is the result. And I thought about how horrific and all it was, that this is a main road. This is a big road. There's a lot of folks that's passing by, and I mean, this is mamas and daddies. This is kids. This is whoever is in the crowd is passing by and got a look on the cross there. And this is, and remember, at this particular time, this is when this is around the Passover. Jerusalem, quite a few people lives in Jerusalem, but at this particular time, there's folks come from miles and miles around, because this is a merely event. It's a very important time for the Jewish people. And I mentioned in Sunday school, I ain't read this nowhere, it just come to me that probably there's a good chance that many of the people that were passing by right then were either carrying or leading or somehow transporting their own sacrifice that they were taking to the temple. But at the same time, and they were passing by the ultimate sacrifice. I mentioned last week that they probably the people, they went by wagging their head, but I imagine some of them little old lambs, they probably looked up and said, boy, I'm glad to see this. And they passed by, reviled him, wagging their heads, and saying, thou that destroyest the temple. Where did they get that? Because when they was in the crowd out there, and these is people that was, when he was before Pilate, these is people that out there, they had been out there and they had witnessed Christ doing miracles. They had seen him do they'd seen him heal people. They seen him do all these things. They'd seen him do miraculous things. This crowd, most likely at the very beginning, they were leaning towards, hey, let's put a stop to this right away. But the chief priests, they circulated in the crowd. It's amazing what a few people can do in a crowd of people. You see it every day on TV when you got these big throngs, a few people holding up signs, and next thing you know, everybody's getting on board. But that's what they went through there. They told it, but listen, he said he's going to destroy the temple, and they told him all this stuff. So they said, give us Barabbas. Likewise, and they said that destroyest the temple and buildest in 3 days, save thyself, if thou be the Son of God. Come down from, if you are the Son of God, then you can come down from the cross. Well, guess what? He could, but he didn't. It wasn't a matter that he couldn't do it. It was a matter of he didn't do it. Likewise, also the chief priests mocking him, and the scribes and the elders said, he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. Well, you think they would have believed him if he'd have come down from the cross? No, they'd have been something. They would have been, well, they didn't have him fixed up right, or there's always, listen, you want an excuse, you can find one. I can remember back when when I was 12 years old and I was lost and I was under conviction, and I was sitting there and it just tearing on me, and I'm thinking, well, if they sang a certain song, I'm gonna go to the altar. Well, they sang that song. Well, I didn't. Hey, you make all excuses you want. You can say anything you want. It's going to be what it is. They said he trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. That's what he said. And the thieves also that was on the cross, the thieves also, cast the same in his teeth. So they weren't saying good things about him either. They were up there suffering him with him. It looked like, and I don't even know where my notes is on this, but it looked like pretty hopeless situation for all these groups of people, for the soldiers, for the passerbys, for the thieves. It looked like a sad situation for all of them. But if I can find it sometime, I can give you some references. But if you'll look, search it out, there was some of all these people that had a change of heart. It wasn't a hopeless situation for any of them. Especially, I probably won't ever get to it. I'll just mention this just so because verse 54. Let me just read that, and I'll go deeper into it. Probably won't get to it this week. Now, when the centurion and they that were with him, watching Jesus, saw the earthquake and these things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God." So they was some people that had some change. I'll try not to deviate and get into all that, because that could be a different message altogether. But going on down into verse 45, where I really wanted to start this morning, there was some things that was happening while Christ was on the cross. This was not just another day. This was not just another Passover. This was different. Passover had been going on for years and years and years since they come out of Egypt. The Passover celebration, it had been going on. Well, this one was different. This was a different time. He said, "Now, from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour." From the 6th hour to the 9th hour. That's 3 hours. The 6th hour would have been about noon. They didn't have their clocks and all this, but their time would, the first hour would be something like 6 o'clock, and the different hours of the day. Well, from the 6th hour, that's going to be about noon. And at noon, what's going on at noon? You ever go outside at noon? It's a good time to go inside in the summertime. You go out there, and it's not long till you're blistered and you're hot. And sometimes I get sweaty just thinking about got to go outside to do something. But this is the brightest, the hottest part of the day. Now, from the 6th hour, from the brightest part of the day from our perspective, there was darkness over the land unto the 9th hour for 3 hours. A few years back, we had, I know people even from this church that drove to, I forgot where. Well, you remember we had the eclipse, and there was a strip down through there where you wouldn't have had total darkness, but it would have been darker than most. But eclipse can, well, remember, it couldn't have been that, because this is time of the Passover. The Passover happens the full moon, and the full moon, the sun's over there and the moon's, so they weren't even close together, so it couldn't have been anything to do with that. Could have been a dark cloud. No, it said there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour for 3 hours. What is darkness? Darkness represents judgment upon the earth. This is, we've heard throughout history, we've heard talk about this as our darkest hour. And well, this, you want to know when the darkest hour was? This is it. On that day, from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. Over in Luke chapter 2, read just starting about verse 8, read just about 3 or 4 verses here. "And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock. And lo, the angels of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone, that's That's when something's shining. When something's shone, that means it's shining. The glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which bell shall be to all people, for unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. When he was born, he was light. Light came into this world. He was called the light of the world. They said, the Bible said that people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. There was light, darkness before him. There was darkness everywhere. He is the brilliance, the light of everything. Light is, what's the importance of light? Well, without light, we got nothing. I know that I see all the time about all these telescopes and stuff, and they look in space and they see this star that was 13 billion. No, they don't. You know what they see? They see light. There is nothing that we know, and well, pretty much there is nothing that we know really about the universe and all that's in it. That God created it. Why did he create it? Well, really, it sounds kind of bad, but he just kind of did it to show off a little bit. He just to show man his glory. That's what it's out there for. It's not out there so we can build a spaceship and go to it. I mean, why we want to leave this? I like being in my yard. You know, I've been places that I didn't enjoy. I thought I wished I was home. But all that we know about this, or think we know about this, is because of light. It's because of light. That's all. We see light, and supposedly this light has traveled all these billions of years. How do they know that? I mentioned the other day, they told somebody, I saw something where they saw that where on Mars they found a place where there was evidence that there had been a pool of liquid water 4 billion years. Now, we don't hardly know what happened last week. Now, hey, I'm not even concerned with that. It's it's just a little bit amusing. But it's all about light. Without light, there was nothing. When Christ was born, there was light in this world. What did God do when he created all this world? He said in the beginning, he said, let there be light. There's not light because we think of the sun and all that. There's not light because of the sun. There's a light because God said, let there be light. In fact, there was light before there was the sun, if you get over there in Genesis. So he's got all that covered. But now, all of a sudden, God that's in control of all this nature, he said, from the 6th hour, there was darkness. If you get into the book of Revelations and all that, and see about the judgment that is coming upon this world, there's going to be great darkness. There's going to be stars falling from this. There's going to be, the sun's going to be dimmed, and all these great things is going to happen. I know it's fashionable nowadays to save the planet, and you know, I don't think we ought to change our oil and go pour it out in the backyard and stuff like that. But we ought to be respectful and all that. But we're not going to destroy this place. But there's coming a time when there's going to be, God reminded them right here on the time of the cross. He reminded them, you go out there, and if you imagine if you'd have been there, if you'd have been walking by, if you'd have been the soldiers there on the ground, if you'd have been whoever was in the vicinity of it, and all of a sudden it's noon, it's the middle of the day, and all of a sudden there's darkness on the face of the earth, that wouldn't have kind of struck in your head just a little bit that this is kind of odd, this is unusual? But even great things like that, and we'll write them off, we'll figure out a way to write it up. But over all the land unto the 9th hour, this was not a natural phenomenon of any, this was a natural event. This is something that cannot be, we like to explain everything. We like to have sometimes we best off to say, well, it's just because God said so. Sometimes Well, just because God made it that way. That's just the reason it is. And about the 9th hour, after about 3 hours of this, and at about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, with a loud voice, he's been up there a while. And I kind of brought this out a little bit last week, that I know Jesus, he's portrayed as this meek, little, humble somebody walking around with a long hair and a beard and a robe and talks real slow and moves. That's the perception that we get. I imagine he was a pretty tough dude. I imagine, because he had not been influenced by the things that we're influenced by giving into sin. What happens to our bodies? A lot of it we can't help. There's an aging process, but a lot of it we bring on ourselves. And he wasn't involved in all this. I imagine he was pretty much a man's man. I believe he was pretty stout and pretty strong. He was, after all that beating, carrying his cross and all this. He cried with a loud voice. They heard him. People around there heard him. And he said, Eli, Eli, I'm not going to even try to, I'll stumble through this word. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, whatever, I'm not. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? This is the darkest time of the whole darkest hour. This is a time when God had to turn his head. There's something taking place here that he can't. Did he not love Jesus? Sure he did. What did he say when he was in the river? He said, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. You think all of a sudden he's not pleased with him? It didn't say, he didn't say, Lord, say, why have you just completely disowned me? It wasn't that. It was still his son, but God had to turn his head. He had to turn away for Christ to die on the cross. This was a dark hour. And some of them that stood there, when they heard that said, this man calleth for Elias. Well, there's people around, that they knew them about the prophecies about Elijah and all that going to be coming here. Well, this wasn't the deal. And straightway, one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. This is some things that's happened here. Middle of the day, unexplainable, it turned dark. And then another thing, Christ, God himself, had to turn his back. This is God turning away from God. Let me explain that to you. I ain't got a clue. I was reading something the other day. You're familiar with somebody called Martin Luther that was involved in the Protestant movement. I don't remember what century, hundreds of years ago, when he broke away from the Catholic Church, come out here, and he found 90-something things that was wrong with the Catholic doctrine, and he went out there, he wrote it down, and he went up there and nailed it on the door. He became a very unpopular dude at that time. In fact, it got to the point that it was like a bounty was put on him. They said, hey, if you see him out somewhere, you just kill him, and we're not going to prosecute you. It's okay. That's how hated he was. But he had got into this, and he saw all these things that they were doing, and he said, none of this, this is not scriptural. And they said, what I was reading, that he took that scripture right there, that verse, and they said that he locked himself in a place for, if I remember right, it was a matter of days that he went in and just concentrating to study on that one particular verse where he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And they said days later when he come out, he didn't know no more than he did. He did not understand. If you want it explained, I guess, Brother Mayo, you can handle that later. You can how can this is a supernatural thing. This is something that we cannot understand what this is all. This, I believe this is a situation that is between the Father and the Son. And we just have to let it go with that. And that's just the way it was. And they went and they took a sponge and they filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. And the rest said, let it be. Let's see, let's just watch. Let's just sit back and see what's going to happen. Let's watch it. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. He sent his spirit away. Now, I know people through the years have committed suicide and done different things like that, have taken their own life. It's happened. But it's through some mechanical means or something like that they do it. Nobody in here try it. Just sit there and just say, well, I'm just going to die. Well, you might wish for it, or I'm sure there's people that in agony and all that long for it, but as far as just saying, I just give it up, this was a supernatural thing. This is not something that they could do. He yielded up the ghost. He gave it up on his own. And behold, get too far into this, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did shake, and the rocks rent. This is a shaking that took place. This earth is going to be, it's going to be shook one of these days. I mentioned this, save the whales and all this stuff. Great, that's fine. Let's do all this. There's going to be a time shortly after the rapture of the church when Save the Planet people, they're going to be very disappointed. There's going to be some things going on that it don't matter how much they march, and there's nothing they can do about it, because it's when God's judgment comes, that's it. And here, some odd things happen. The veil of the temple. I don't know if we've ever did it. It seemed like we did. We used to. We'd have plays at the church, and we'd have a curtain across here. You got things. You got like a shower curtain at home, and it's a thin plastic. It's to keep the water from splashing out in the floor. Sometimes we've been laying in bed at night, I guess because we have cheap stuff. I don't know. It ain't fancy, but we've been laying in bed at night and hear noise. What was that? Well, that shower curtain fell again. Sometimes in the middle of the night it just fall down. This veil, this is not a little thin plastic curtain. This is a huge thing. From what I looked up and tried to study about this, the veil in the temple, you went into the temple, the holy part of the temple, but you had the Holy of Holies in the back part, and there was a veil there. This was a big curtain that separated one from the other, and you didn't go back there. There had to be a yearly sacrifice made. The chief priest, he had to go back there. I don't know. He had to go back there, and he had to make this sacrifice. And the first thing he had to do was make a sacrifice for himself, because he was going back there to commune with God. And from what I read and studied on this, it was so sacred. He was the only body once a year that could go back there. Nobody else could. And from what I read, some of the old Jewish writings and all that, when he went back there, they'd tie a rope on his leg. And what happened? We didn't just invent dropping dead, having a heart attack or anything like that. It's been going on for many, many years. What if he went back there and what if he fell over dead? How were they going to get him out? They couldn't go back there to get him. If they had a rope on him, they could eat. But this was a serious thing. And this particular veil that was there in the temple, what I read on it and what I studied up on it, it was about 4 inches thick, and it was woven, and it was made over a period of time out of the finest materials and all this, and it was reported to be about 30 feet wide and about 60 feet tall. You're looking about 15 feet right here, something like 15, 18 feet, something like that. This was about 60 feet tall. It took many, many, many priests to go up and just to hang this thing. This was a massive thing, and this was a thing that separated man from God. It had to be there. It was there. Man could not just go in there and do as he pleased. They had a king that tried that one time. I forget that. My mind goes blank sometimes, but there was a king. He went back there and he said, I'm the king, so I can do this. Not only did he do it, he went back there and offered a pig. Well, that's another double whammy, and it didn't work out too well. You get back in the Old Testament and see about it. It didn't work out too well for him. But this temple that separated us from God, it was there, and it was there for a purpose, and you just wasn't going through it. And it said, behold, 51, the veil of the temple was rent in twain. It was torn in half. There was something took place. I don't know how many years this thing had been there. But, and you imagine this, just like there was people walking down the road when Christ was on the cross there. Cross. They was looking at him on the cross, carrying their sacrifices, heading to the temple was probably just full of people. There was a big crowd there. Can you imagine what they'd seen that veil for years and years and years, and all of a sudden said it was torn in half. It was ripped from the top to the bottom. Wasn't like a bunch of folks got at the bottom and started tearing. Well, they couldn't have done it anyway. But the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. There was a separation was taken away because the ultimate sacrifice had been made. And the earth did quake and the rocks rent. They split. They didn't wiggle around. They separated. They split. And the graves were open as the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. He's given a taste of some things that's going to happen one of these days. There's going to be darkness on this earth. There's going to be judgment. There's going to be resurrection. These people, the bodies of the saints. Who did he resurrect? The saints. This is who come out of the graves. This wasn't just every Tom, Dick, and Harry that was buried out there. Look, you can go down to Rainbow Memorial or any of these cemeteries. Brother Bailey, he used to talk about he liked when Christ come back. He'd like to be in the cemetery preaching a funeral when that happened. And I told him one time, I said, yeah, you might be. Somebody will be. That's going to happen to somebody. But you know what? All them graves are not going to bust open. It's going to be a select few. And they that came out, and many of the bodies of the saints which slept, they arose. Where the spirits come from? This is the spirits that God had released. And they came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. People saw this happen. This took place. This was an event where and who saw it? Well, Christ, we're going to see later on that Christ for 40 days, he spent all this time before he ascended back into heaven. Who did he spend this time with? He spent it with the saints. That's I thought in terms of these people. And these people here, they went into town after Christ come back out of the grave and all this. And I thought about, and I just close with this, I thought about one verse where it said that where he is, there we may be also. That's, where was these folks? They was with Christ. And he give a little taste. There's a whole lot of things happened on the cross. There's a whole lot of things taking place. And he give us a little foretaste of what is coming. And it was all nothing new. It wasn't nothing that was, God said, he never said, I didn't see that coming. He never said, I got to change the plan. Let me mention this. I saw something the other day, and I didn't bother to look at it, but it said something on YouTube or something about what was there before the Big Bang. I don't know how God created. I mean, when he created this world, he spoke it into existence. And as far as I'm concerned, he may have said bang. I don't know. I don't know what he said. But anyway, what was there before that? And you know what? They keep making, talking about what was before it, but they all confess we'll never know. Well, there was something before it, and keep this in mind, before that, before Genesis, before creation, before all that, there was a plan, and we see that plan taking place and being carried out on the cross. Ken, if you dismiss us.
Thank you, dear Heavenly Father, for another precious day. Thank you for everything that you do for us. All our blessings, God. Again, God, bless all the preachers, the families, the churches, teachers, all the instrument players, singers, all of this, God. Bless all the churches, God. You know what they need, what they're going to take care of them. And again, God, bless Sunday. I want to see great message today. Maybe it'll help somebody that walked out, God. For all this, we give you praise and glory. Amen.
Hi, Mrs. Karen.